This is it. Pop the champagne. Launch the ship. After a lot of preparation, we're excited to be with you today. This is the inaugural show. This is the first of its kind, or at least the first of its kind in my mind. My name is Seth Denson. This is Somewhere in the Middle. Excited to be coming with you today, live in most cases, I think, from Real News Communication Network studios here in the great Dallas, Texas. I am joined in the booth by Mr. Apple Zackintosh himself.
Seth, how's it going? Thank you for using my Twitter handle.
Hey,
it's very sweet of you.
We're spreading the word, man. I was reading your Twitter this morning.
Oh, yeah.
Hot sports opinions.
Some hot takes over there. Yeah, very, very professional of me.
I like it.
Thanks.
I'm also joined in studio by an entrepreneur, a lawyer, father of great kids, husband to a great wife, but probably his most impressive accolade, one of my very best friends, Brandon Benson. Brandon, thanks for being here.
Nice to be here. My wife might disagree a bit, but
which one of those parts?
Well, the best part of it.
Yeah.
But
okay.
I'm happy to be here.
In my own mind.
Happy to talk.
Listen, more about Brandon here in a second. I'll definitely opine on mine and Brandon's friendship and why I thought it was very important to have him here during this first show. But what I thought I'd do is just kind of share what this show is going to be about. The idea, this first episode. Hopefully we get renewed for a second.
I think you'll be okay. I know we're not very far in the weeds here, but so far so good. Yeah, you read the ship steady. Yeah,
time will tell. But so what this show's about? Listen, let me give you just kind of a background. Since the beginning of the year, this year, I've had the opportunity to be a guest on multiple shows throughout markets throughout the United States, including Fox News, ABC, CBS, and most of what I've been talking about is healthcare. That's my background. I'm a healthcare strategist. That's the world that I live in. And interestingly enough, though, healthcare takes on a number of kind of connotations when it comes to politics and what's going on. And so I've been visiting with the great folks here at Real News for a while about the possibility of a show. We went through a number of iterations of what that show might be, and is it going to be about healthcare or business or fatherhood or any of those other things. But after a recent show, Zach and Josh, Matt had me on their show earlier this month, or last month, I guess it was.
Yeah, not long ago, yeah.
We just, it was following one of the shows that you guys had. I think you guys had a couple of, we'll call them political commentators on. And
sure.
the show got a little heated or intense, I think maybe is a better way of describing it. And so, I was on right after that. And I was having a conversation in the lobby here in the studios. And that show came up, and I started talking about, kind of my own thoughts and where I fell on things. And I made the comment to Josh. I said, what, I think I fall somewhere in the middle. And he looked at me almost like he got that bright idea, like the light bulb just went off at his head. And he goes, That's your show, man. That's it right there. So, the middle has a lot of connotations to it, right? So just a little bit about me. I grew up the middle child. I think that'll probably come out on the show at some point. I grew up middle class. Upper, lower middle class, I think we probably could have a conversation about what that really means. I didn't know that we didn't have a whole lot of money growing up. My parents were great, and we never knew the difference, but we had a whole lot of love. That's what really mattered.
That's middle class.
There you go.
That's what that is. I didn't know either way. That's how you know you're in the middle.
That's right.
There you go.
And so, but I also think politically I fall in the middle. I think the airwaves today are oftentimes, taken up by the extremes on the left and the extremes on the right. And at the end of the day, we don't get anywhere. We just argue. Right. And my version of success, if I'm in those extremes, isn't having a real conversation or even listening to what you might have to say on the idea. It's making sure that I scream louder than you do, or I get the last word. And so the whole idea behind this show was, let's have a conversation. Because there's a lot of things I don't know about. And I might have my opinions, but those opinions, it's okay to change those opinions, right? Brandon, what are your thoughts?
That's right. I mean, it's always more about learning than winning. And I think right now, on most of the radio waves, it's about winning versus learning.
Yeah.
And so I think if we can sit in the middle and talk about our issues and walk around them and think about them from multiple perspectives, you're going to come to a better place at the end of the day, whether or not you agree or change your opinion.
That's right. So that's what this show's going to be about. We're going to have conversations. We might not always take on politics. Brandon and I are both fathers. Our kids, interestingly enough, and I don't know that it was planned this way. It just happened to be that When Brandon and his wife found out they were having a kid, within a couple weeks, my wife and I found out we were too.
Really?
So something in the water.
What are the odds?
I don't know what's going on.
Something in the water. That's got to be it.
It's got to be.
But anyway, so Brandon's got a couple of great kids. I got a couple of great kids. I think we're going to talk fatherhood at some point on the show.
We'll do our best,
Yeah, absolutely. We're learning there, too.
Yeah.
I like to think I'm a good dad, but I'm probably somewhere in the middle on that, too.
You probably move up the ranks on that.
I hope so. I had a great one to learn from. We'll talk about life in general and what's going on there. We will take on politics. I've got a couple of thoughts on what we'll talk about today, maybe, as we kind of dive into the show a little bit and give some teasers about where things go. But all in all, what we want from the show is it to be a real conversation about life and what's going on. So maybe we can move the needle a little bit. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I sure hope so. I hope that through our conversation and through just well thought out perspectives, that we can move the needle both ways, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, in the age of if it bleeds, it leads, the idea is that this show will create conversation stirring enough to interest you more than whatever other people are shouting, right? That's the goal. That's what we're going for. We'll be louder because we're more profound, I suppose. Yeah,
Yeah, maybe.
Sorry.
Let's hope.
You guys are staring at me like I just saw a ghost or something. I don't know. That's what I'm going for. That makes sense to me.
That's right.
Sure.
So if you're listening to this show for the first time today, or you pick it up on podcast later on, Zach, this thing will be available on podcast.
You
right?
can find this anywhere you find your podcasts, except Spotify, and I'll get them one day. It'll happen. But meanwhile, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, podcast.com. We're on YouTube, Facebook. Check us out. Yeah, follow us. Get involved.
All right. Maybe somebody besides my mom will subscribe to this thing.
Somebody will.
Right?
I know it.
I know my mom will, though. There's no doubt. There's
You've
no
got
doubt.
two moms then.
There we go. Yeah, Brandon's mom will too. Just my other mother. Yeah, this will be shared multiple times. I have no doubt on her platform. If not, then we know it's a bad show.
Oh, yes.
It shouldn't get pulled back in. But just kind of layout of the show. So what you can expect. Obviously, I think the first segment of most of these shows will be a little bit of opining and just kind of getting to know one another, at least for the first few rounds.
Sure.
We'll talk a little bit about what's going on in the day. Again, we may bring up the politics. I've got a couple things we'll tease here in the next segment. We'll talk about life in general, and we'll give some thoughts and welcome those from you as well in the listening sphere that want to share your ideas and thoughts too on what we should be talking about. But in the end, we're going to listen. We're going to listen to one another. We're going to have a conversation. We may not always agree. I hope, though, that at the end of the day, I walk away feeling like I've learned something new. And that if I haven't changed my opinion or perception, I at least understand yours a little bit better. That's the end goal.
That's absolutely right.
Right. So stay tuned. That's segment 1. Segment 2 is coming up. We're going to get into a couple of teasers on kind of what to expect and throw a couple of softballs to the crowd. So hold on. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Somewhere in the Middle. I am Seth Denson, your host, at least for today. I'm joined by Zach in the booth. Zach, how are you?
I'm doing, Seth. How are you?
Got Brandon still. I'm doing well, thanks. I got Brandon still in the studio. He didn't run out.
Just happy to be here.
I think Zach locked the door. I don't think he can go anywhere.
That's right. You're locked in there, Brandon. Relax.
Well, I'm here for the ride.
There you go. All right, so what we're going to do is segment 2 here, what I thought we would do. Let's just kind of spitball a couple of things. This is no preparation, by the way. By the way, that's how I live my life.
Sure.
high intensity.
Healthcare, you said you work in? Yeah.
High intensity, low preparation.
Sure.
Right.
High intensity, low preparation.
That's right.
Yeah, all right.
But we're gonna do that this way. We're just gonna kind of throw a couple of hot topics that are out on the news wire today, and maybe talk about those. The final segment I'm excited about. So the final segment, something maybe I'm passionate about. So we'll tease that. If you're listening now, please do listen to the final segment. If you listen to nothing else, listen to the final segment.
You know, for your first episode, Seth, that's a solid tease. Well
like
done.
that?
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Well done. Come back.
Nice. Very
Come back.
professional.
All right. So let's just talk about what's going on in the headlines today. Brandon?
Let's do it.
All right. Why don't we take on...
Oh, no.
Oh, I know.
Here it comes.
Here comes a low preparation part.
No, not
Right?
at all. No, it'll be great.
How about wardrobe and Melania Trump?
Ooh.
Yeah, Brandon's walking out now.
Is
Rolling
that door
his
still
eyes.
locked?
I know, right?
You know, there's one of those issues where I understand people wear what they wear and they say it makes no statements, but there is some level of responsibility when you're in the public role to take responsibility for every message you send, right?
Sure.
And so, you know, I think that while there was definitely a marketing message in there, it probably wasn't as intense as they wanted it to be from the left.
Yeah.
I think that that was all a ploy at some point, in my opinion. However, you know, I probably wouldn't have done that. Probably wouldn't have taken the same tact.
It's hard not to think that somebody wasn't looking at what she was wearing and saying, are we trying to say something here? Right? I mean, come on. You're the first lady of the United States. Again, and by the way, I'll say this. I actually like Melania. I think that, you know, she's done what she's been able to be part of. She's handled with as much dignity and class as she can, given what she's having to deal with from the noise level, we'll call it. So, but, you know, if she didn't get it, shame on whoever is handling her on that, because they should have gotten it and said, hey, you know, probably not the best thing, or let's be prepared. And unless, listen, I've heard this too, that it was intended to strike a conversation and change the narrative and all of that. So,
yeah. You know, I mean, there is a whole conversation about that in the style of Trump, which is a totally different style. And not saying that I would ever agree with it, but to create firestorm and issue around something so that they can focus in on the issue as it exists.
yeah.
We do know one thing, like you said, Melania is well crafted. I don't think there's a single aspect of her life that's not thought out. Mm-hmm. Especially, she's been the public persona since day one, even before being a political figure. And so I think that there was something to it. What and what was the intent? You know, sure. we can all take our takeaways from that.
Yeah. It's you know, it's tough. She's a former fashion model, right? Mm-hmm. That's the deal. So, like, it's difficult to step back and think somebody who used to be a fashion model, who now very clearly understands the public spotlight, just on a whim grabbed a jacket out of her wardrobe and was like, "This one's fine," and didn't look at the back of it. So it's difficult to believe that somewhere somebody didn't stop and say, maybe this is a little caustic. Maybe this is a little much, you know. Maybe news headlines might run with this. Maybe we should do something about this. And I don't know what's more concerning to me, the idea that something that small, a detail that finite, in a administration that should be paying attention to all the details, like any presidential administration should be, missed that, or the idea that it might have been some kind of master of puppets misdirection. Either is concerning, because at the end of the day, either way, shouldn't you be focusing on policy and legislation? I mean, that nobody should be caught in the weeds about the First Lady's wardrobe, I think, right?
Yeah, no, listen, I would actually agree with that. I think that's the challenge here with this whole thing, right? Is it does take us off of topic. It takes us off of having a real conversation. Now, listen, I can make the argument nobody was really having a conversation in this, and maybe I'll shift gears on that a little bit. You know, and we'll talk a little bit. I want to get your thoughts on this whole immigration issue. Sure. You know, we're in. For those of you that aren't local to where we are broadcasting from here in Dallas, Texas is obviously in the forefront of what's going on in the immigration world. Mm-hmm. It's hard not to be when you're this close to a border. And you know, and again, I think this is one of those areas where I do fall somewhere in the middle again, and we'll talk about this in the third segment. There's my second teaser.
Well done. Hey, yeah, good stuff.
You know, we'll talk about this a little bit more in the third segment, because I think that the challenging is we oftentimes will put blinders on as to the way that we perceive things, and it's very easy to do based on where we sit. But the reality is you're not sitting where maybe those that are on the other side of the table are. And I'm not talking Republican, Democrat here. I'm maybe talking about natural-born U.S. citizens versus not, especially with those that are awfully close, right? And you see, hey, listen, we grew up in Midland. Let's talk about that just for a second. So Brandon and I grew up in Midland, Texas. You had a thought?
Yeah, I wanted to. Well, no, let's talk about the Midland, but I want to go back to the point
That's
made
30
earlier.
minute show, man. We probably ought to go back.
Well, let's go back real quick so we don't get away. But
all right, go for it.
So I think the point is left, right, everyone in politics gets involved in politics, and you're talking about policy and getting back to policy, and they're missing policy.
Yeah.
I think there's a finer point to be made there too. Is kind of us guys in the middle, or us folks in the middle, think about the compassion aspect of it. Like, it's pretty hard and caustic for someone to walk in with that jacket, walking into a real factual situation of kids being separated, regardless if they're here legally or illegally.
Yeah.
It's not a very compassionate move.
Yeah.
And so there's something that there, to me at least, just as a guy looking at it on a blind level, is we know it's happening. Whether you fall on the side of it should happen or it shouldn't happen, there's a bit of a lack of compassion in the way that was presented as it went out.
Yeah, compassion came up in a conversation over the weekend talking about this whole thing, and I remember, growing up, we grew up in Midland. This is my pivot.
Yeah.
Right. Midland, for those of you who don't know, where George and Laura Bush met.
Yeah.
Midland, a very conservative town. I think if you were a Democrat in Midland, you probably didn't make that really public. Right?
I didn't.
There you go. Right. So we didn't. You didn't. I mean, I don't remember knowingly meeting. Obviously, Brandon, liberals at home. We had blinders on. This is the way the world works. Well, my first experience out of Midland was a trip that I got to go to Boston. You want to talk about a cultural shift, right? And I was awakened very quickly as to how life is outside of where I always thought life was. But that brings into this whole conservative conversation, right? I remember when President Bush 43 ran, he ran as a compassionate conservative, right? That was the whole idea. But we have become this segmented world where one side loves and one side hates until the message is delivered differently, and then the other side hates and the other loves. And so if you're a Democrat, the perception oftentimes is that we're the party of love and acceptance and willingness, so long as you get in line with what we think
exactly
like and are willing. And if you're a Republican, well, we love Jesus, and so that's where it begins and ends. By the way, I love Jesus too. And
disclaimer, we'll run it in front of the show.
That's right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do start to wonder if we really want to infuse Christ's love into this conversation, are we really looking at it with his eyes?
I think that's a very fair point. You look at our society as a whole, and the mission as a Christian, but also our mission as a society is to again look at it from a worldview. Yep. And to remember that there are multiple people that are allowed to have multiple different beliefs and styles. And so, for a long time, Christianity was the middle. Mm-hmm. Now we think about multiple cultures into our society and a blended society, and what is the middle? And I think that may be part of the conversation that we should have is, what is the middle?
Right.
Because from my perspective, I'm in the middle, but maybe not.
Yeah, and I think that as we start to think about what the middle is, that's really where you gain ground, right? Because we when we were talking about the lead up to the show, we talked about the right and the left kind of playing this massive game of tug of war. Eventually, the rope just breaks, right? We're not moving anybody. And so what I'm hoping is that we can have this ground swelling from the middle, having conversations. And when it comes to immigration, for example, I think that we need to have some type of, I don't know if it's a wall, but we need to have something that separates the United States from every country. Right, whether that's legitimate borders of a wall, or whether that is the way that we patrol things, but otherwise we're just in one great big society, and we really don't know how to manage it. Whether that's financially, socioeconomically, all of that, there needs to be a separation. There has to be a process. Now, I also think we need to improve the process. It shouldn't take 10 to 15 years to get into this country legally, but we also can't be the safe haven of the world. Listen, I started out talking about Midland. There were neighborhoods growing up in Midland that were nicer than my neighborhood, right? Nicer than your neighborhoods, right? And as we looked at those neighborhoods, I remember as a kid thinking, man, if I could just live in one of those neighborhoods, if I could just live in one of those houses, like everything must be great. But the reality is we didn't. And you know what? It was okay. But we need to have a deeper conversation about getting people here that want a better life and that are willing to contribute to society and speeding up that process and making it easier to where people don't feel like they just got to float across. But at the same time, we got to make it a bit more structured where it's just not freedom to come across anytime you want and structure. What say you?
So, I mean, I think the interesting question is the knowledge base of the people that are coming across. And obviously there's a whole scale of people, and the left and the right are going to use their examples for who's coming across and why we should enforce it differently,
Sure.
right? I mean, MS-13 is coming across, says the Republicans, right, with little kids.
That's bad.
Yeah, it's bad. There's no doubt.
Right. We don't want them.
Objectively, yes.
You're not welcome.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And Central Americans are walking for 3 weeks and coming across, and that's good because they want to come and they need a better place, and that was the intent of our country at one point. And so there's a debate. I come down to the point it's not actually the physical barrier that matters. It is the providing people the knowledge to come across in a way that is official and that is documented. But instead of, I mean, if you walk across here and you're not, I mean, there are easy waypoints to come to find. Because I imagine, and I don't know this because I don't speak from a perspective. I didn't walk for 3 weeks. But I imagine that those people only know one way to do it because of the limited information they have. And so if they come across and they're surrendered or they're found and they say, hey, listen, I want to go through the process, then I think there should be a designation for that. And I don't know for sure, but I think it's more about the process of bringing them in versus the physical barriers to it.
So if there were, if there was easy access to information, I don't want to say billboards, but if there was an easy way for anybody in a foreign country to understand, hey, if you want to get into America, here's how you do it, you think that'd be beneficial, right?
Yeah,
I think that's fair, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would too, but I think, again, I'm going to get lumped in the extremist here. I don't mean to by any means.
Watch out.
I know, right? But there has to be a way to structure some type of protection of the border, right? Something that says, and again, I know this is the chicken and egg conversation, right? Which comes first? Do you fix the border and then restructure how people can get into the country? Do you not? What do you do? What about those that fall in the middle or fall outside of the timeline that it's just not going to work? There are people that legitimately need to get to this country for asylum. That has to happen. We have to help those people. But there are people, I'm not using MS-13, but let's use that as an example. There are people that are probably not coming here for the best reasons. So how do you patrol that? How do you say, hey, listen, we are a country of borders, we are a country of laws, but we are a country of compassion, and we want people that want to be part of society to be here, and we want to be a place where people can come as a place of refuge, right?
I think that's exactly right. And I don't know how you do it. I can't fix the problem. If we could, then we wouldn't be doing this on a national basis. But again, I think it's a matter of perspective. No matter what laws are in place, no matter what process we have, those that want to come in, and obviously we got to make it harder for the people that we don't want to come in to come in. I think the real question is who do we not want to come in? Like obviously there's this set of people that we don't want to come in.
Right. There's some definites, right?
I think there's a difference of opinion on the rest of that.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I would hope that we would come back to our founding beliefs of, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses. It doesn't say, give me your best and your brightest and your smartest only. Because we were a nation of refuge. We were a nation of compassion. And guess what happened from those people, from those tired, hungry, poor masses? We became one of the greatest nations.
Yep.
I'm one of those people who I don't want to say a wall is necessarily extreme. I think a lot of people think it is. A wall is extreme. That is the far end of what's possible. And I don't want to assume that because I don't necessarily believe it. I think people think that because you think of walls in history, the Great Wall of China, the Berlin Wall, both were meant to keep one side away from the other. Neither still functions that way.
That's right.
You can walk right past the Great Wall. It does not stop you. Yeah. So I think people. I worry that the idea of just a wall is one solid slapdash answer to a problem, and maybe that is that the best solution, right? I think is that a more important conversation to have, or is this a Band-Aid problem? We should fix this now and worry about it later.
No, listen. I think it does need to be a deeper conversation.
Yeah.
And it's one of those that we need to have more hopeful shows like this, where we bring people together and have a real conversation about this versus just here's my extreme opinion, there's your extreme opinion. We're going to scream at each other, but we're never going to ultimately come together on this. And depending on where you get your information, you're going to tend to side there and only there, right? So if you're on the right, you're going somewhere to get your news and your information and you're getting fed. And if you're on the left, you're going somewhere to get your news and you're getting fed. But there's really no independent way to get access to information.
No.
So hopefully more shows like this will come up and we can have these conversations. You want to know where I land on this?
Sure.
Great. Stay tuned for segment 3. We'll come back and we'll tell you where I land on this conversation, on this topic. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Back. This is Somewhere in the Middle. I am Seth Denson, joined in the studios by Brandon Benson. Hey, Brandon.
Happy to be here.
And in the booth by Zach, Mr. Apple Zackintosh himself. Second plug of your Twitter page.
Thank you. Very sweet. Yeah.
Want to follow me? I'm at Seth Denson on Twitter. I think I've got a whopping 32 followers.
You
right
know,
now,
we couldn't all be quick enough to scoop up our names in hashtag form, all right? So I appreciate that you were on top of it.
Right. So, hey, for this final segment, I just want to take a couple minutes. I want to thank a couple folks. First of all, obviously, big thanks to Zach, helping put on this show.
Thanks.
Big thanks to Anna, who helped with kind of putting the show together and thinking through it. All of the folks here at Real News Communications Network, Josh Hart, Matt, Sarah. Listen, the folks here are just phenomenal. They've been really helpful in getting our voice out there and getting things heard. Big thanks to Josh Hart, who really helped me come up with this idea, helped structure some frame of mind around it and put wheels on it, so to speak. Yep. Big thanks to Brandon for being in studio with me today.
No, thank
buddy.
you, Seth.
I appreciate it, man. And a bigger thanks just for being who you've been in my life. It's powerful. We've got this group of guys, Josh, Brandon, Jeff, and myself. We grew up together. We probably all come down differently on certain things and certain topics, but we always accepted each other for who we were, and we may have given each other crap about it from time to time, but
occasionally.
Yeah.
Well, that's friendly neighborhood ribbing, right? Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
Nah.
That's exactly right. But big thanks to those folks. I'm acting like I won an Academy Award here. And I'm
well, it's a big honor. First show.
First show,
yeah,
right?
Nothing to scoff
Under
at.
the belt. But no, big thanks to, listen, I love my mom and dad, my brothers, my family. I grew up in a household where opinions were meant to be shared, but they were meant to be opinions, and that they were not meant to just be adopted. Rather, you were supposed to come up critically with what your own thoughts processes were, and you were needed to be articulate about how you communicated them, because then and only then could you start to develop your principles on how you hold your life and hold yourself. And we're all held to a higher calling, at least we were in my house. So big thanks to Mom and Dad for that.
Well said, Seth. Well said.
Hey, thanks, man. And also I would be remiss, my reason for getting up in the morning, my wife and kids, great support staff for me. They are the joys of my life. They make me want to be a better person. They make me want to be a better listener, and make me want to continue to have conversations like this to say, hey, I don't have all the answers, but let's have conversations, because that's how we get to constructive movement here in our country. So big thanks to my beautiful wife, Jenna, my wonderful daughters, Emerson and Arabella. You are my reason. You are my life.
Aww.
So thank you.
That's so sweet.
Hey, thanks, man.
Gosh.
I have moments, right?
Sure, moments. Yeah.
All right, so this is the final segment, and something we're gonna make a point to end every show with. We're gonna have conversation throughout the show, but I think there's something that I always like to share where I land on this. So that's this final segment. Where I land on this. It's not long, but it's somewhat lengthy, so I will be reading it a little bit, just kind of going over my notes because it's important. But yeah, so if you've been wondering, and while I'm still contemplating some things, let me say it this way. While I'm still contemplating some things, I do know where I land on this. Another week and yet again a headline that seems to rip at the core of American values. Last week, the airwaves were filled once again with discussions surrounding immigration, finger-pointing from both the left and the right, and the American citizen finding themselves in front of a distinctive line in which pundits will tell us we had to choose on which side we stand. If you're a President Trump supporter, you cite law and order, and if you're not, you cite human rights. We no longer live in America where we have legitimate conversations. Rather, we find ourselves in a state where my belief in one thing means my emphatic opposition to another. For my friends that scream human rights, I understand and agree. It's unconscionable to think that a child could be torn away from a parent. But at the same time, perhaps we should have a real conversation about physical barriers to encourage those seeking asylum to do so through more manageable locations rather than porous ones. Increased security measures, both diplomatic and physical, won't solve all of our immigration problems, but they do allow us to begin managing them more effectively. And for my friends on the right that scream law and order, I would ask you this: does the punishment really fit the crime? Not just for the parent, but also for the child. Take a moment and envision a life so much better than the one you have now, and all you have to do is walk across the street and get it. Even if there was a no trespassing sign, it would be hard not to take the chance, especially if it meant a better life for your kids. As a parent, there is no worse feeling or punishment than having your child taken from you. And as a child, we can only begin to imagine the mental anguish of being surrounded by those you don't know in a place you're not familiar with, without the comfort or protection of your parent. I understand that the law says you're not welcome unless you follow the steps, but maybe let's just consider for a moment a couple of things regarding those seeking a better life. First, let's consider just for a moment that those in the third world may not know all of the parameters of U.S. law. Second, perhaps even if they did know the law, they just might believe that the champion of human rights throughout the world, the United States, wouldn't take away their kids for the crime of wanting a better life for them. Ronald Reagan, a man I greatly admire, spoke of America as a shining city on a hill. A place, he said, that if it had walls, it would also have doors open to anyone with a will and a heart to get here. I fear that the no-tolerance actions we are taking today have dimmed the light of our shining city. But my hope is that those with the power to impact change will do so in a manner worthy of the greatness with which our country has so long been associated. It's time for us to come together and be what we have always been, a place of refuge, a place where the tired, poor, and huddled masses yearning to be free were welcomed and given an opportunity for the life those of us born here are so blessed to have received. And one final thought for Attorney General Jeff Sessions. I, too, am a man of faith. And while I understand the desire to quote Scripture in our own context and infuse our mutual faith into the conversation, I'll remind you that the Pharisees were also known to quote Scripture in an attempt to serve their narrative and reject Christ's message of love. So with that, I'll share with you my own context of the words of Christ. Let the children come to me. Scriptures tell us of a story of a young Jesus fleeing his homeland with his parents to a nearby foreign country to escape oppression and seek asylum. It's a good thing Egypt didn't have America's no-tolerance policies. If it had, then where would we be? Finding myself somewhere in the middle, I'm Seth Denson.